Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Wealth Compliance Leader series. My guest today is Craig Iskowitz, who is a business and technology strategy consultant and a recognized expert in our wealth management technology community. Craig is a founder and CEO of Ezra Group, a strategy consulting firm providing advice to banks, broker-dealers, asset managers, private equity firms, and fintechs. Craig, if somebody cornered you and said, look, what are the emerging digital wealth themes that you're observing in the wealth tech space? What would you say to that?
There's a lot of trends going on. Everything's digitizing. Everything's moving to the cloud. But what we're seeing more of is advisors and other wealth management firms looking to build closer relationships with their clients, more, beyond just the investment. Asset management and investment management has been a big part of the advisors' lives for the last 50 years, but that's changing slowly as it's becoming more commoditized. So firms are looking for more ways to build those relationships with clients. Part of it is advice engagement, where we're seeing more tools that are helping advisors understand how clients are feeling about their money. They're helping them understand how the non-CFO spouse, we call it, and how to engage them, how to engage children, and these tools, different tools that are available, which you can find on the Keatsis Ezra Group Advisor Tech Map in the advice engagement category, are helping advisors become more empathetic. I'm calling it, they're closing the empathy gap, where some advisors have that empathy built in. They can see when a client's feeling stressed, they can see when a client's having issues, and they can work with that. And other advisors maybe don't have that ability. So the tools are helping them to do that and build tighter relationships.
Love that. And I love the thread along the lines of, whether you call it human empathy or having that connectivity between the advisor and their clients and sort of the generations to come. Another theme that's been effectively front and center for our industry, Craig, as you know, is this emerging range of regulations, whether it's the marketing rule of one day, regulation best interest, the Department of Labor coming in and saying, hey, look, we expect everybody to be fiduciaries. That's been one of the, I want to say, sources of constant change in our industry. And whether you look at this from a wealth tech or reg tech perspective, and given your, consulting hat, how would you advise firms who are looking at these emerging changes in their industry? Should they buy? Should they buy vendors' technology points like InvestorCOMs, or should they look to build in-house?
Well, I would contend that reg tech is wealth tech.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not two separate categories. Every advisory firm, every firm that's a fiduciary in our space requires compliance and needs regulatory coverage. And it's part of every part of their business. I can't think of a single area where there aren't regulatory issues involved. One of the things we work a lot with is new account opening, as an example, and there's compliance all over that. The larger the firms, if you're working with a small RIA, they may not have the same type of workflows. But we work with mainly enterprise firms with $1 billion and up, as well as some of the largest broker dealers in the country. And they have very complex workflows, and compliance is all part of that. And the new accounts have to flow through compliance and be approved. It's more than just the data. I mean, of course, there's always NIGOs if the data is just incomplete, but if the packages are complete, it still needs to go to compliance. It needs to be routed. Either the software is routing it, or some cases they're still manually routing it, which we discourage. It's not scalable, but compliance has to review those accounts and approve them for being open, and that all is tracked in the systems and software, and it becomes scalable and becomes manageable. And once you've got everything under digitized, then it's easier for the firms to manage that and see where their roadblocks are and see how well they're doing around those areas. So I would contend that the new waves of regulation are just solidifying the needs for wealth management firms to build reg tech into their systems. But back to your question, build versus buy. We rarely recommend building software for advisory firms because it's not really their strength. Most advisory firms aren't strong in software, don't know what it takes to build great software, because it's just, it's a capability, it's a skill, and it's an experience of, decades of building software. Not to say that some tools have not been built by advisors, but the ones that become very successful are few and far between. We see a lot of advisors building software, coming up with ideas, but turning that into a product that can be maintained is difficult. In this day and age, software has gotten easier and easier to build, cheaper and cheaper to build. Even now, used to be, we said you need $1 million and 6 or 8 people to build a product that you can then sell in the market. And that's dropped and dropped and dropped to now you might need just 2 people and a couple, $10,000 or $15,000, and you can build a decent product with all the capabilities and all the tools and frameworks and code bases, open source that's available. But we still don't recommend that they build unless it's really core to their value proposition. And regulatory is rarely core to your company. Everyone's got to comply to the same rules. You can't, it's hard to innovate in that area. Of course, you guys do because it's your business, but for an advisory firm to build regulatory, so reg tech software doesn't make sense in our opinion.
I mean, you mentioned new account opening as one of those core areas where it impacts, to your point, new business, it impacts onboarding new clients, it impacts a whole range of compliance matters. And in our world, Craig, rollovers or making rollover recommendations has been so central and eye-opening, because there is this generational wealth transfer. Some others have said, that there is this great resignation that's propagated a significant number of rollover transactions or recommendations being made. And to your point, whether it's the SEC, FINRA, or Department of Labor, there's been an immense amount of scrutiny when it comes to that. Another observation, I mean, I loved your thoughts on buy versus build and focusing on the core, specialization of labor, to quote Adam Smith. Another piece we've been seeing is this affinity towards, well, maybe we should do things manually first versus a digital first. And I'm sure as someone who's been functioning as a consultant in this capacity, whether it's strategy or technology, you're faced with this all the time. How do you advise clients who are sort of looking at a brand new, legislation or regulation and saying, look, should I tackle this manually versus a digital first approach?
We always recommend digital first, especially now that cloud software is ubiquitous and every application can be delivered seamlessly, quickly, without major installation requirements. You can just click a button and you've got the application deployed to your entire company. You would always want to go digital first. You would never want to build a manual process. We work with a lot of companies that have been in the business for a long time, and that's where we see a lot of manual processes. Firms that are 30 years old and built their capabilities and their processes as part of a broker-dealer, as an example, and they just recently broke away, then they may have a number of manual processes that they're still working with because the broker-dealer limited them to what they could use. But for breakaways, firms that are starting from scratch, if they're not bringing technology with them. For example, if it's an advisor leaving a wirehouse, he doesn't have any technology, he just has accounts, then you always want to go digital first all the way through. I just spoke to Jim Crowley from a CEO of Pershing, and they're launching a new initiative called Paper Free in 23, because there were still firms managing business on paper. And he came out with a statistic, I don't remember the exact number. It was millions and millions of trees are still being cut down and turned into pulp in order to send out client statements on paper. And we need to get away from that. There's no reason for that. Having it in a PDF file is just as easy as seeing it in paper. So always go digital first. It's also easier to manage. You want everything on your system. It's hard to track if it's a manual process. If you're using spreadsheets, to try to see it, roll it up to a management view is very difficult. You're moving things around manually, copying, pasting between spreadsheets to see how many accounts we opened, or how many rollovers we managed, or how many trades we reviewed. You never want to get caught in that. So we work with a number of firms moving them off of manual processes, or a web of a combination of digital and manual. We see that also. We also see that a lot, where they'll start digital Then they'll slowly start adding in manual processes, either because they just want to tweak it a little bit, or maybe they don't realize what other capabilities their technology has. And it's easier to throw a spreadsheet at it rather than get trained on other capabilities the software has available. But going digital first is always our recommendation.
I couldn't agree more, and it's interesting because we poll our marketplace along with the range of webinars that we've been hosting, and the question has been consistent, and the responses have been quite consistent. The SEC has said, look, anytime you're making an account type recommendation, we need you to do some form of best interest analysis. Is advisory the right account to recommend to Craig, or a brokerage account, given the unique circumstances, unique goals? And there needs to be some justification for the recommendation. And to your point earlier around account opening, this has been something that we're seeing still, to quote your conversation with the CEO of Pershing, there's still millions of trees that are being cut as a result of this. And I certainly see tremendous opportunity in the marketplace, and I'm sure you are as well, for whether it's a multinational firm or multi-state firm, all the way down to individual breakaway advisory firms, to embrace that digital first approach.
Well, you brought up a good point when you're talking about recommending different investments, and every advisory firm is required to document that as to what that they gathered. They evaluated the client's risk tolerance, risk preference, risk profile before they put them into a model, and that's got to be tracked. You don't want to do that manually. We're still seeing some firms doing it manually or just skipping it altogether. You need to have some documentation, not only when you open the account. So usually it's the most common ways is by creating a proposal. It could be a very simple proposal, investment policy statement, and there's plenty of software tools out there. Almost every advisory platform, a portfolio management system, has some sort of proposaling capabilities built in or integrated with other tools, so they can do that. And then every time you change the risk tolerance or move them into a different model, you must reassess the risk tolerance to make sure it's still accurate. And if you're doing things manually, it's very difficult to know if the client's investment portfolio has drifted away from their IPS as documented. And if you don't update it, let's say that their client used fears for 20 years and their risk profile changes over that time, and you don't document the changes, if the SEC comes in and starts looking through your files, they'll say, hey, why is this client in this investment when they opened the account, they had this IPS or this risk profile? You might say, well, it's been 20 years ago, they changed. Well, you didn't document that. And that's a problem. I mean, I'm not sure how much they're going to fine you for that, but it's not going to be fun to have that kind of conversation with the regulator.
Oh yeah, we you know what? I've worked on the other side of the fence and lived it for longer than a decade, and I know that sort of, hey, after the fact analysis, right? Help me understand, what analysis you undertook 3 years ago when you opened an account, 3 years ago when you made a portfolio recommendation or investment recommendation, hold this ETF versus that mutual fund. How can you do that in a manual sort of paper first strategy?
No, they do it. They do it. I mean, I can tell you a crazy story. We're working with a very large insurance broker dealer, tens of billions of dollars in assets, and they were using a risk tool, which was great, one of the popular risk tools. And what they would do was, and I'm not making this up, of course, they would open the account, run the risk profiling software, gather, which documented the client's risk profile and assessment, put them into a model. If X number of years later, the client wanted to change, they would run the risk tool again with the new information, give them, print out a hard copy of the change, that the report, and then scan it, send it to the client, and then shred the paper. Why? I don't know. That was their process. You had to print it, then you had to scan it, and then send it to the client, or they probably also mailed it to the client because they had to mail them a hard copy. And then they shredded the extra copy they're making. It didn't make any sense. So some of these processes, they're just doing it because they've always done it that way.
Right. Let me ask you this, and I really value your insight on this, and you are clearly a thought leader in this arena, Craig. In a perfect world, complete blue sky, there is different acronyms being thrown out there: wealth tech, reg tech, integrations amongst other things. You talked about the the advisory map, which you collaborate with Michael Keats on. Is there a perfect world where that advisory desktop can be as fluid and digitized as possible? And what's it going to take for our industry to get there?
Well, I don't want to burst your bubble. There's no perfect world, but there's better worlds. And the issue is that things don't sit still, and your businesses don't sit still. We come in a lot of times to help clients optimize or improve or deploy new software, and they ask us how long it'll take. And we'll tell them it takes 6 months to implement new software. They'll say, why so long? And the answer is, well, you've got a day job. All your staff has day jobs. If they could stop what they're doing and just work with us for the next week, we could probably knock this thing out. But they can't stop your business. You've got to keep working. So there's no perfect world, because you can't just stop and build what you need to build. It's the old adage of you're jumping off a cliff and you're building the airplane on the way down. And that's often the case with most advisors, in that they've got their businesses to run, and then they're trying to tweak things, add new software, update, optimize, improve, while they're still running their business. So things take a while. And while you're building and while you're deploying a piece of software, new software is coming out. So there's nothing perfect, but it can get better. And one thing we pride ourselves in, we come into a firm, we'll do a current state assessment, look and see where your gaps are. And then we do a lot of comparisons of advisor experience with other firms in your space. So if you're a multi-billion-dollar RIA, you will be competing for certain advisors to come onto your platform, versus which might be different than one of the largest broker dealers, what types of their advisors they're looking for. They may have a different type of platform. So there's always gaps and there's always issues. Back to your build versus buy analysis, there's also the best of breed versus all-in-one analysis. And we get asked that all the time. And the answer is it depends. Depends on how much technology capabilities or technical capabilities you want to bring in-house, and what kind of budget you have to support that. Because the more best of breed tools you are using, the more integration issues, the more data issues you are going to run into, and you will need more technology people to support that. So if you are willing to put that effort in and put that money in, then you can build a best of breed solution, but it's not going to be easy, and it's rarely going to be seamless, because there's just too many issues. One of the things we realized for over many years is that integrations just don't work very well. A joke I make is, if integrations worked half as well as vendors claim, we'd be out of business. But they never do. There's always issues. And it's also an opaque part of the business, what integrates with what vendors integrate with what. They'll put some logos on the website, but you don't really know anything behind that. Is it a sign-on, which is the most basic level of integration, or is it a one-directional data pass? Is it multi-directional? Can I pick and choose what data I move? Or is it an embedded widget that I just flip a switch and turn it on, which is the highest level? So we built out our own research, which we're calling the Ezra Group wealthtech integration score, that we launched last year. And it gives each vendor on the map a score of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10 as to how they integrate with every other application on the map. And it just is one other tool in the toolbox for advisory firms to, when they're evaluating software, to say, well, if we have these two applications, we like both of them, which one should we pick? We might pick the one that integrates better. So that score is visibility. It enhances transparency in the market to understand how well these integrations, the applications are integrating, and that will help you move towards the perfect world. If you know how well your applications connect, you can make better choices. And also it's encouraging vendors to be more transparent about their integrations, which makes it better for everyone.
Craig, I could not have said it better myself. Thank you for sharing your insights, bursting my bubble, and also talking a little bit about the symbolic as well as practical importance of integrations in our new digital-first advisory world.
Well, folks, there you have it. You've had a chance to hear from Craig, one of our industry's leading experts when it comes to digital practices for wealth managers, amongst others, including asset managers. And so if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, amongst other channels, and have yourself a great day.